Have you noticed how today on social media, almost everyone is claiming to be a guru, a prophet, a chosen one, or a healer? Someone who is here to guide and teach everyone else. Everywhere you look, in every corner of the internet, there is someone positioning themselves as spiritually awakened. Someone who has the answers. Someone who can help you, heal you, or lead you. But when you actually stop and look deeper at what they are saying, something starts to feel off. Most of it is vague language, repeated ideas, or repackaged quotes taken from older teachers and masters. And the real focus is not even on delivering understanding or grounded insight. It is just a performance. Deep, prolonged eye contact, mystical pauses between sentences, or cryptic one-liners. They quote the masters constantly, but they never live as those masters lived. There is no embodiment behind any of those words. And this makes it one of the most dangerous dynamics spreading in today's world. Because spirituality, the very thing that was meant to liberate the human mind from hierarchy, power games, and material control, has now become another product inside the same system. It has become business. And as time goes forward, this will only accelerate. As AI replaces more traditional jobs and people search for new ways to gain status, authority, or income, the number of self-proclaimed spiritual figures will multiply rapidly. Everyone will be able to claim anything. Which makes one skill absolutely critical: the ability to tell the difference between what is real and what is performative. Because without that discernment, navigating spirituality in the modern world becomes a very confusing and psychologically dangerous experience. So in this video, we are going to break this down completely. We will analyze the psychology behind fake spiritual gurus, the mechanisms that allow them to gather massive audiences, and why so many people fall under their influence in the first place. Part 1. Supply and demand dynamics. The first thing we have to address is that the problem does not exist only on one side. It does not lie purely with fake spiritual gurus themselves, because the reality is, they do not operate in a vacuum. They operate inside an ecosystem that allows them to exist, grow, and thrive. And the main mechanism they rely on is the ignorance and psychological hunger of people. Fake spiritual gurus are highly aware of who their audience is. They understand one fundamental truth about human beings. Humans are hungry for meaning. It does not matter in what form or shape that meaning comes. We are meaning-making creatures by nature. Even in random events, we look for patterns, connections, and purpose. So, they sell meaning. They sell interpretations of reality that they know people already want to hear. When you feel existential emptiness, confusion, or lack of direction, you look for meaning. And fake gurus know this. So in many ways, they are the symptom of a deeper psychological demand. The ecosystem that sustains them is built primarily by followers. And this is why the phenomenon will only intensify moving forward, because the modern world is producing the exact psychological conditions that increase this demand. For many people, it is not just about meaning anymore. It is about belonging. Despite being hyper-connected digitally, humanity is experiencing a loneliness pandemic on a global scale. People are more networked than ever, yet more emotionally isolated than ever. And as AI continues to replace human labor, automate roles, and reduce traditional social structures, this sense of isolation will deepen, which creates the perfect psychological environment for spiritual figures to step in as emotional anchors. Part 2. Ego mutation mechanism. This is one of the trickiest and most deceptive layers behind fake spiritual gurus, because it hides inside language that sounds evolved and conscious. Many of these figures constantly speak about having killed the ego, transcended the ego, dissolved the ego, or moved beyond the ego. They use these phrases as proof that they have reached a higher psychological state where ego no longer influences them. But this is largely illusion. Because what is actually happening is not ego death, but an ego mutation. The material ego does not fully disappear, ever. It simply finds a new identity to operate through. Before, their sense of power came from material metrics. I am rich, I am successful, I have status. Now, that identity shifts into a spiritual form. I am awakened, I am conscious, I see what others cannot see. The authority source changes, but the psychological mechanism stays the same. And to understand why this happens, you have to look at a deeper human driver. Humans seek authority, certainty, and power. Power is one of the primary forces shaping human behavior across all systems. Money, titles, influence, recognition, social hierarchy, all of these are different expressions of the same underlying pursuit. So when someone cannot, or no longer derives power from material success, they may seek it through spiritual authority instead. The hierarchy shifts from wealth and status to consciousness and awakening. And psychologically, this can be even more dangerous because it hides behind a moral and aesthetic mask that appears virtuous. Material ego is easier to detect. Spiritual ego is harder because it hides itself under a humility mask while secretly still seeking dominance. Many fake gurus are extremely skilled at constructing these identities. And this is where the distinction becomes important. Real spirituality should never redirect your authority toward another individual. It should direct you inward, toward your own mind, your own perception, your own questioning. But fake gurus reverse this dynamic. They position themselves as the final gateway. You may feel better after listening to them. You may feel chosen, special, elevated, or emotionally soothed. But you do not actually gain any real understanding. You do not gain independent clarity. And this creates a psychological dependency loop. They become a form of emotional or existential drug. You return for validation. They tell you what you want to hear. They reinforce those identity narratives that make you feel unique or spiritually superior. But they never teach you how to outgrow them. Because if they truly taught you how to think independently, how to reach deeper understanding yourself, how to even surpass them, you would not need them anymore. And if you do not need them, their authority collapses. Which is why many build entire brands and business models around maintaining that hierarchy. So the performance becomes central. Speech patterns slow down. Mystical pauses are inserted. Eye contact becomes theatrical. Clothing becomes symbolic. Beads, robes, hand gestures, vocal tone, visual staging, all curated to reinforce the spiritual persona. The aesthetics deepen. The substance remains shallow. And this is how ego survives under the mask of enlightenment. Part 3. Savior Complex Psychology. This is another pattern that appears very frequently when you analyze fake spiritual gurus at a deeper psychological level. If you put away the language, the symbolism, and the spiritual narratives they present outwardly, what you often find underneath is that it is not really about healing others or elevating humanity. It is about them feeling chosen. Chosen by God, universe, or destiny. If you listen carefully to how many of them speak, you will notice this underlying theme. They position themselves as messengers, guides, or carriers of truth meant to awaken others. And to understand why this happens, you have to look at the psychological drivers behind what is called the savior complex. One of the most common roots of this pattern is childhood invisibility. Many individuals who later develop savior identities grew up feeling unseen, unheard, or emotionally neglected. They did not receive the attention, validation, or love they needed during formative years. That absence creates a psychological deficit, and in adulthood, the psyche seeks to compensate for that loss. Spiritual identity becomes a powerful vehicle for reclaiming importance. If I am a healer, I am needed. If I am a guide, I am valued. If I am chosen, I am significant. So the narrative forms internally, often unconsciously. On the surface, it sounds altruistic. I want to help people. But when you unpack it psychologically, it often traces back to a personal wound. I know what it feels like to be invisible, so I must now become someone who is seen. And again, this is not always malicious or consciously manipulative. Many genuinely believe their mission is service, but intention does not erase psychological drivers. Another overlapping root is powerlessness. When individuals experience prolonged periods of feeling powerless, socially, financially, emotionally, or relationally, the psyche seeks sources of regained agency. The divine mission narrative becomes a powerful compensatory structure. If I am chosen by a higher force, I am no longer powerless. If I am carrying truth, I am no longer insignificant. This restores psychological power without requiring material success. Then there is the desire for admiration itself. Humans naturally respond to recognition and validation. But in the savior complex, admiration is reframed as proof of impact rather than just personal gratification. They may present themselves as serving others, but the emotional reward often comes from being admired, respected, and followed. The admiration becomes the reinforcement loop, and over time, the identity stabilizes around being needed rather than actually helping. So what looks like spiritual leadership externally can, in many cases, be an unresolved psychological need for visibility, power, and validation operating through a spiritual framework. The savior identity becomes less about liberating others and more about stabilizing the self. Part 4. Language manipulation and projection. This is another domain where many fake spiritual gurus become extremely skilled over time. Some develop this skill consciously. Others grow into it unconsciously through repetition and audience feedback. But regardless of tradition, costume, or spiritual label, whether they present themselves as shamans, mystics, Sufis, healers, prophets, or energy workers, their speech patterns tend to follow the same underlying structure. And once you learn to detect that structure, it becomes very difficult to unsee. The first characteristic is vagueness. Their language sounds deep, but carries no operational meaning. It feels profound when heard, but when you try to extract actionable understanding from it, there is nothing concrete to apply. Statements are framed in symbolic or poetic ambiguity that prevents clarity. This serves multiple functions. If the listener feels good, the guru becomes associated with emotional elevation. If the listener feels confused, the guru becomes associated with intellectual superiority. Both outcomes reinforce their authority. Confusion is not a failure in this dynamic. It is part of the loop. If you feel confused, you assume the problem is your level of understanding, not the clarity of the message. So you return, seeking more explanation and more interpretation. If you feel emotionally uplifted, you return to recreate that feeling. Either way, dependency is reinforced. Another recurring mechanism is criticism deflection. Many fake gurus are highly resistant to scrutiny. But instead of directly rejecting criticism, they often reframe it. If you question them, they may respond by implying you are not conscious enough to understand. They may speak about spiritual hierarchies, levels of awakening, or energetic readiness. The implication is subtle but powerful. If you disagree, it is because you are unevolved. If you doubt, it is because you are unconscious. This reframing protects their authority while destabilizing the questioner's confidence. Then there are non-falsifiable claims. These are statements that cannot be proven true or false. They operate in abstract metaphysical language where verification becomes impossible. Because they cannot be tested, so they cannot be challenged. This keeps followers suspended in a psychological limbo where nothing can be grounded or resolved. Uncertainty becomes permanent. And inside that uncertainty, their authority remains centralized. But this dynamic does not function through language alone. It is reinforced through projection from followers too. Fake gurus understand, consciously or unconsciously, that belief is not built purely on logic. It is built on psychological transference. Even highly educated or intelligent individuals can fall into these dynamics. Many followers unconsciously transfer authority onto spiritual figures. This is authority transference. They seek guidance, structure, and reassurance from someone who appears grounded and certain. There is also parental projection. Spiritual leaders often embody archetypal parental traits: calm voice, protective language, moral framing, emotional reassurance. Followers with unresolved parental wounds may project unmet needs onto these figures, seeking validation, safety, or approval they lacked earlier in life. And then, lastly, there is responsibility surrender. Life is chaotic, uncertain, and psychologically demanding. So for some, it feels easier to hand over interpretive authority to someone else. Let someone else define reality. Let someone else explain suffering. Let someone else give direction. Listening to comforting narratives becomes psychologically soothing, even if it prevents independent thinking. So through vague language, criticism deflection, non-falsifiable claims, and follower projection, a feedback system forms. The guru maintains authority. The follower maintains psychological comfort. And real clarity is quietly sacrificed in the process. Part 5. Real spiritual teacher versus fake spiritual teacher. If you have followed the breakdown so far, the natural question that should arise is simple. How do we actually tell the difference? How do we distinguish someone who is genuinely guiding from someone who is performing guidance? So the clearest way to understand this is through contrast, because once you see the psychological patterns side by side, the difference becomes obvious. Fake spiritual teachers, at the end of the day, orbit around themselves. The center of gravity is always them, their authority, image, brand, income, and validation. Questioning is discouraged, reframed, or subtly punished. Anything that can destabilize their authority is either ignored, redirected, or buried under spiritual jargon. They sell you certainty. Because they know people are searching for certainty in a chaotic and unpredictable world. So they provide ready-made answers, often vague, often comforting, but rarely operational or verifiable. Their authority structure is centralized. Everything points back to them. Their teachings empower dependence rather than independence. You need their voice, sessions, and books. Without them, the system collapses. Now contrast this with real spiritual teachers. A real teacher does not discourage questioning. They encourage it, even when the questions are directed at them. Because questioning is not rebellion in real spirituality. It is the mechanism of awakening. The role of a real teacher is not to create followers. It is to create understanders. People who arrive at insight through direct experience, inquiry, and reflection, rather than repetition of someone else's words. A real teacher decentralizes authority. They push you back toward your own perception, your own investigation, your own clarity. They do not want you to depend on them. They want you to outgrow them. Because the true measure of a teacher is not how many followers they gather, but how many independent thinkers they produce. In that sense, the job of a real master is to create future masters who can stand without them. And another critical marker is humility toward uncertainty. Reality is dynamic. It is always evolving, always expanding, always shifting. So anyone claiming final, absolute certainty about existence is revealing their limitation. A real teacher is comfortable admitting the limits of their knowing, because spirituality is not about possessing answers. It is about deepening the quality of them. So the difference becomes clear. Fake teachers centralize power, sell certainty, and cultivate dependence. Real teachers decentralize authority, encourage questioning, and cultivate independence. And once you see this distinction, navigating the modern spiritual landscape becomes far less confusing.